Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. I've been purchasing gold and silver from JM Bullion since before they were a show sponsor because they have the lowest price of any dealer I know of. JM Bullion now offers free shipping on all orders. Check them out online today at jmbullion.com. Our individual first aid kits are now on sale. They're MOLLE-compatible pouches in Coyote, ACU, OD, or Black. They're equipped with an Israeli battle dressing, quick clot, TK4 tourniquet, suture kit, and lots of extras. It's perfect for your car, bug-out bag, or home first aid kit. Go to the PrepperRecon.com homepage and click on the IFAC store tab at the top of the page. They're on sale for $89, and that includes shipping. This kit could save your life. Today's guest is Mack Worley, host of the On the Move show. Mack, thanks for coming on the show.
I really appreciate you having me. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Now, can you give us a brief overview of what you cover over at On the Move?
Well, our show, it's a political talk show, but it's, I like to refer to it as Patriot Talk, Patriot Radio. We cover emergency preparedness. That's a big topic that I like to cover. But I like to focus on history and a lot of stuff that I do is I like to expose what the left is out there doing and then give them counter arguments, things that I don't agree with. The last show that we did a discussion on the minimum wage. It just passed in Seattle. So, I gave my view on minimum wage and I basically do stuff like that. I just give my views. I try to get listeners involved. The whole name of the show, On the Move Show, it's about getting people active, getting people on the move, and trying to get people to wake up and get off the couch.
And they just raised the minimum wage to $15, is that right?
Yeah, $15 in Seattle. Those guys have no idea what damage they just did to themselves.
Now, back when I started working, I'm going to date myself here, but minimum wage was $3.25. It seems like that since it's effectively doubled now that it's somewhere around the $7 mark, it seems like that everything should have been fine. Now, actually, if we go back to the early 1900s, I think an average week's work of salary would have typically been around $7.50. So what happened? Why can't people make it on $7.50 a week anymore? Is there something being done with our money?
Oh, yeah, as you know, probably better than I, the money that they've been, printing and digitizing within the Federal Reserve, we went so far off the rails when it comes to, the gold standard. Our dollars are not backed by anything, real anymore. So the dollars have become, worth less and less. And eventually, if they keep at this current rate, it's going to become worthless. But, minimum wage, it's not even just the economical problems of minimum wage. I mean, there are severe problems, even according to the Congressional Budget Office, that their own reports say that, that the people that are hurt the most from this are people that can't afford to be hurt the most, the low income families. But even without that, just the simple thing of being able to choose, that the ultimate, my ultimate definition of freedom is choice. So, the lack of being able to choose as both an employee and an employer is astounding to me that people are actually really, big fans of the minimum wage. They're fans of people not being able to choose. Now I can't choose to work for a job, even though it's acceptable, the amount of pay that I'm getting for the work that I'm doing. I now can't choose to work for $8 an hour, and the employer can't choose to hire me for that much. And it just prices people out of the market. If my work, if my work ethic and my ability and skills, things like that, if it's only worth $8 an hour, I just lost a job if I'm not able to get $15 an hour out of this guy.
Well, I would think at $15 an hour, and then plus having to provide health care insurance on top of the employer's portion of Social Security and Medicare tax, which now, since you've got to pay approximately 7.5% for that, and that just doubled by the minimum wage doubling, I would imagine there's a lot of folks that are just going to have to close the doors, and those that don't are going to scale back labor. If you were getting by with 20 guys, you're going to try to do it with 15. And so,
exactly.
Isn't that going to raise unemployment?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like I said, there's their own reports, the Congressional Budget Office. It says that the people that are going to be hurt the most by this are the low-income people, because what will happen is it prices them out of the market. If I, as an employer, am now at a choice of where I have to hire another person at $15 an hour, but I'm not going to get $15 an hour worth of benefit from hiring that guy, I can't. So I may end up having to just spread out the responsibility of that to the people who already work for me, or I may end up having to take my entire, company out of state to somewhere that I can afford to do business in. And I know several business owners personally that are already considering doing this if this happens statewide in Washington.
Now, you also cover prepping on your show, you said. When did you wake up to the need to prepare?
Oh, well, for me it was kind of a slow thing. It just kind of started out as a hobby, and I guess it still kind of is a hobby. I was in the military, and I'm out doing security on a nuclear weapon site with one of my partners that I was out there with, and it's a long day. It's a 12-hour day, so we're out there just kind of talking, and it started out as what would you do if the zombie apocalypse started right now? And then from there, the whole day we're talking about this, and it kind of evolved into, what would you do if it was a Red Dawn style scenario happening right now? And, my mind kind of went off into these areas, that are kind of silly at first to think about, but then, I started learning more and getting more realistic and starting to get a better approach to it. So I would say about 5 years now, I've considered myself an actual prepper though.
And you say it's silly, but, the former director of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano, doesn't seem to think that it's silly. On her exit speech, she said that it's a matter of when, not if, that we have a major cyber attack on American soil that could potentially take out the power grid, or knock out the banking system, or potentially, I know there was an episode of 24 where they used a cyber attack to melt down nuclear reactors. Just like the ones you were guarding, and there's no physical way to guard against those types of things.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not disagreeing on that. In fact, quite the opposite. Like for me, it started out, like I said, with the zombie apocalypse. That's like the most far-fetched thing that you could possibly imagine. But it is real, the amount of preparedness that you can get for that. So if you are prepared for the zombie apocalypse, you are prepared for basically anything that could happen. It's one of those things that it's a universal preparedness, standpoint.
That's right. If you're prepared for a hurricane, you're going to do better in an economic collapse than those that weren't, and vice versa. But zombie apocalypse, we've got something like, I think 20% of Americans on some type of psychiatric medication, so that might not be so far-fetched either.
That's a good point. Yeah. Plus, I'm always fascinated by zombie movies, and I've always been a big zombie fan. And I do think that there's a potential, possibly one day for the rabies virus to mutate like it's happened in movies and stuff, and that would be the most realistic version of zombies that, if it ever happened, had something to do with the rabies virus.
And then there were all the people that were smoking bath salts there for a while, and they were actually running around naked and eating people.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was wild news when I read that.
Now, what have you been working on lately, personally, for your own personal preparedness?
Oh, well, I moved out here last year, and since I've been out here, I've kind of been slacking a little bit, but I'm trying to get my bug out bag back together, and I've been inventorying everything, and back in the December 28th, 2012 thing, I think it was 21st, December 21st, 2012. I stockpiled a bunch of stuff just in case, I didn't think anything was actually going to happen, but I got a bunch of food and things like that, put it in airtight containers and whatnot. So I'm going to be in the process of cycling out all my food that I stocked up, and just small little things. I like to prep incrementally. I don't like to move too big at one time. So a bag of rice here, a can of beans there, small stuff.
Absolutely. That's the goal, is to be a little bit more prepared today than I was yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the US Geological Survey recently issued an earthquake warning in Oklahoma. They said that there's a strong possibility that they could get a 5.0 or larger. Now, I think that you live on the Ring of Fire, so you're probably pretty well versed in earthquake preparedness. Do you have any recommendations for the folks in Oklahoma?
Well, as far as earthquakes themselves, I personally have actually never been in an earthquake. But being that I have moved out to an area that is very prone to earthquakes, I make sure that I have a go bag ready to go and things like that, because that is one of those situations where you may absolutely have to bug out. So, to just get out of that area, that danger zone. And especially if it's the big one that hit or something, and there's a lot of civil unrest afterwards and things like that, that may be an area that you may not be safe in anymore. So, for me, the bug out bag is a big deal. I try to have a plan. I think that is probably, the number one thing right there, honestly, is having a plan in case something happens. If you're not able to get in contact with your group or your family or whoever you're with, having an established, this is what we're going to do in this scenario. That way you don't just never have contact with your loved ones again, you guys are able to link up somewhere. So, I've heard a lot of horror stories about people waiting around for other people to show up and then they end up, being, hurt or killed in the process because, something happened. Either, a fire got to them or, they ended up just getting stranded. That happened in Hurricane Katrina. I know some people were just waiting around for their loved ones, and their loved ones never came, and they ended up getting stranded, stuck there. So, all these things I think are important to have, especially when it comes to earthquake preparedness, because your telephone communications can get knocked out, the power can get knocked out. A lot can happen with the earth, shaking beneath your feet, ripping things down. So, it's all stuff that people need to plan for. But, the bug-in strategy, I think it probably works a little less effectively with the earthquakes. And on top of which, with tsunami dangers out here on the West Coast, that's a problem too.
And I don't know how effective this would be for tsunamis, but I've seen a lot of people on YouTube that will basically do like a survival bucket challenge, and they'll see how much survival-related gear they can get into a 5-gallon bucket, and they'll dig a hole and bury it. So, if it was one of those cases where your structure was destroyed, but you were able to get out before it actually collapsed on top of you, you might not be able to get in to get to your preps. But if you had it shallowly buried in the backyard in a 5-gallon bucket, you'd be able to get to that bucket. And if you just had a few items in there, some water and some food and maybe a flashlight, and maybe you could have an inexpensive firearm stashed in there, and maybe an AM/FM radio with some extra batteries. You might even be able to get a little bivvy tent in there. That might be a good thing to have.
Yeah, and the good thing about like caches like that or bug out bags is that they don't have to. You don't have to survive forever off of it. It doesn't have to be enough stuff to live forever off of. But it's good to have enough stuff to get you somewhere else. It buys you some time. Give you like 3 or 4 days to get from A to B. That way that you can figure something else out when you get there.
Right. You don't have to jumpstart society.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, if we were to have a major earthquake, do you think we can expect the government to do the right thing? I mean, after all, they kind of have a track record for managing disasters. After Hurricane Katrina, we saw house-to-house gun confiscation. 9/11 brought us the Patriot Act, and probably my personal favorite has to be the house-to-house warrantless searches in Watertown after the Boston bombing. And then not only were they doing warrantless searches, but after they would bring the people out of their own homes at gunpoint, they'd run them down 2 or 3 houses where there were other officers waiting to frisk them and disarm them. if they were to happen to have a weapon on them in their own house when they know that there's a terrorist running around in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that to me was very disturbing. I was very disturbed when I heard about it during Hurricane Katrina. And I think the one thing that we can count on when it comes to the government is for them to use every emergency as an opportunity to gain more power. So, we've seen that with, the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act. All of these things, in my personal opinion, are crazy, usurpations of power. They are the government violating the Constitution and, doing it with, the public just clapping. To me, it's like, I always relate things back to history. So, I look back at like ancient Rome and how, the Romans, they watched their republic just be decimated and turn into an empire. And people were happy about it. People were just excited. They got behind Caesar, and they were really excited the fact that, hey, we got a strong leader, and to me, I see a lot of similarities in the American Republic, in the way the power's being usurped from our government. I am very distrusting of governments, especially when it comes to any kind of implementation or legislation that restricts our freedom. The kind of laws that I'm a big fan of are the laws that restrict government. I think we need more of those kind of laws. But as far as, if there was another big disaster, I mean, you can pretty much guarantee that the government's going to violate our rights in some way. They're going to try to pass some legislation. They never let an emergency go to waste. That a crisis go to waste. That's one of the left's tenets of things, that one principles that they stand by is that they try to use every emergency or crisis to their benefit. So I can guarantee you, if something happens, they'll try to use it.
Yeah, I think it was George Washington that said, "Government is pure force. And like fire, it's a dangerous servant and a fearful master." Now, what can we do to combat this type of behavior from our government?
Well, that's up to your listeners out there, and it's every single one of our jobs to hold our representatives accountable, and not just through your votes, but actually, sending them letters, supporting the good ones, people who are out there doing good stuff, trying to expand liberties for people, restrict the government. You need to support the people that are out there doing good. Your legislators, your representatives, those people need to know that they have the public, the public has their back, so to speak. But the ones that are out there doing bad and trying to basically usurp more power, the Harry Reids and the Nancy Pelosi's out there, the, Barack Hussein Obamas, those people, they need to hear from you too. And I know how easy it is to just be silent and not mention, anything to somebody because, they're a Democrat and what does it matter? They're just going to ignore what I say. But it's important to get their attention, to say that you don't agree with it and let them know the way that they're acting is going to affect the way that you vote and that you do vote. And then after all the political stuff aside, I mean, it's also important to be prepared and, prepare for any contingency. So, don't rely on your government. Don't be so dependent on the government because they need you to be dependent. The more dependent you are on these programs, the more dependent you are on them. So, try to have a sustainable income, try to pay your bills and not be so reliant on these government programs and subsidies. And then, I mean, if we all got to that point, if we all did those three things, we would be, we'd be a lot better off, I think.
Now, would you agree that the battlefield has to start in the hearts and the minds of the citizens?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's like that now, and it's been like that throughout time, I would say. Just look at, Thomas Paine. He wrote the book Common Sense, and that actually sparked the American Revolution. I mean, it was already going on, but it didn't have a whole lot of support. And after people read that book, it changed the hearts and minds of the people, and a lot more people started supporting the war and for the war of the Revolutionary War against Britain to try to be independent from them.
Now, right here in Broward County where I'm at, there's some protests going on. There was a boy in the Broward County school system here, and he had free reading time in his class, and they were told that they could read anything they wanted during this free reading time. And so he decided that he'd read his Bible during that free reading time. His teacher said, "Not in my class. You can't read that in my class." How well do you think that would have went over if it hadn't been the Quran?
Yeah, I think the left would be climbing out of the woodwork to protest that. I think there is a pretty messed up double standard that we have here, and first of all, we have First Amendment protection of freedom of religion. So, and just to be clear, the Constitution, it does not give us that right. It just protects us against the government legally from infringing on that right. So, that kid has every right to practice any religion at any time. There is no right place that you have to do it, and because it's a right, you don't have to ask for permission. So, whether or not he's reading the Bible or the Quran, it doesn't matter. But now, the hypocrisy of the left is that they won't stand up for Christianity. That they stand up for things that they have their own agendas for, and one of that is the Muslim religion. And for that, I can guarantee you the left would have freaked out, and definitely the Muslim community would have freaked out, and they would have had every right to. My whole thing is that we need to find those strange bedfellows, as Glenn Beck has said, and find people who we don't agree with on everything, but we agree with them on this one issue, and we support them on this one issue because they're right, and we don't just ignore, when they're right on something, even though they're wrong on everything else. We don't have to concede that they're wrong on everything else. We just support them on that one issue.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about your military service?
I was in the Air Force about 6 years. I was security forces, and I was stationed in F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming. When I first went out there, I didn't really know where Cheyenne, Wyoming was, so it was different. It was kind of a culture shock. It's a smaller community out there, but it's the city itself is mostly military. I would say that the town grew with the military base, and it was established there to basically protect the railroad from the Indians on the westward expansion. So anyway, the base, I'm a huge history buff, as I've said. I'm really fascinated with all forms of history, so I enjoyed that because I go do the base tours and things like that and learn everything there is to know about that. But anyway, my first few years in the military, at that base, I did, nuclear weapons security. So I went out to these missile sites, and these are the sites that hold the intercontinental ballistic missiles, that can shoot all over the world. And I did security for those. And then after a few years of doing that, then I moved to the Armory, and I worked in the Armory for the rest of my enlistment. So I had a lot of fun in there, learned how to shoot a whole bunch of different kinds of weapons and clean them and break them down and do maintenance on them, all that good stuff.
Well, thank you very much for your service.
I
now,
appreciate that.
How important is it to spread the message of truth, to wake up our law enforcement and military before they get the command to disarm American citizens?
Oh, yeah, I think that's absolutely critical, and that's one of the reasons why I'm a member of the Oath Keepers. I'm a chapter member out here in Vancouver. If your audience isn't familiar with the Oath Keepers, I'd highly recommend you check them out. They have 10 principles that they will not do things, orders that they will not follow, and there's no point in having this kind of organization if we don't get members of our military currently serving and members of the police department currently serving in this as well, because it's not what you wouldn't have followed in the past or anything like that. It's what you won't currently follow now. So what orders will you not follow now? We need people to have these kind of things in mind while they're currently doing the job to protect us or serve us or provide for the common defense. If we have as much people as possible in these Oath Keeper organizations and other organizations similar to them, then we can prevent, another Hurricane Katrina where they, took confiscated weapons illegally. We can prevent the usurpation of power from our government because, this whole idea of power, it's all an illusion. One guy is not powerful. It's the people who follow his orders. So if we won't have people who will follow his unlawful orders, then that guy doesn't have any power.
Yeah, and it's something that I think that a lot of law enforcement officers don't think about because they don't think that's something they're ever going to be called to do. And then I think when they're in a Katrina situation or when they end up in a Boston Marathon type of situation, they've not thought it through. They've not thought about what they're going to do in that instance, and they just kind of go with the flow, and they look to the guy to the left, and they look to the guy to the right, and okay, well, he's doing it, and the boss said do it, so I guess I'm just going to do it. So they kind of have to think about it before it happens. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, if you haven't thought about it already, then you're probably just going to go along with it because, I mean, unless you're already, very, strong in your beliefs, but I find it hard to believe that you'd be already strong in your beliefs, constitutionally, because most people are just, generally constitutional believers, that they don't think about it too much. They're not really involved in politics. They don't think about the dangers of government, things like that. So, the average person probably didn't think about it too much. But if you're liberty oriented, you strongly believe in the Constitution, you've learned as much as you can about it. I find it hard to believe that if you're in that law enforcement capacity that you hadn't thought about it already. So the average person probably hadn't thought about it. So, like you said, they're just going to look to see what the guy next to them is doing, and they probably won't think about it much in the moment until after everything is said and done. Maybe they'll regret it after the fact, but we need people that have already thought about it. People that have already decided what they would do if they were in that situation. And I know that when I was in the military, and several of my brothers in arms in the military, we had these conversations of what we would do if we were asked to disarm the American public. And I know a lot of people that I spoke with, they've already thought about it, and they said they wouldn't accept that order.
And I think that a lot of people write it off as conspiracy theory, and they just think, oh, that's never going to happen, and they just don't realize that it's already happened, not on a national scale, but it's happened in Watertown, and it's happening in Katrina, and New York is getting closer and closer to being a completely gun-free zone. They've restricted magazine capacity to 7 rounds. There's so many semi-automatic pistols that don't have 7-round magazines, so they've effectively banned those guns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What part of shall not be infringed do they not get?
I don't get it. Mack, you've given us a lot of good stuff to think about today. It's been a great conversation. Now, can you tell the folks where they can catch your show and when it airs?
You can check out my website, onthemoveshow.com. And I broadcast on blogtalkradio.com/onthemoveshow every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can also check me out at facebook.com/onthemoveshow and on my Twitter, twitter.com/onthemoveshow. And if you are interested, I have a bunch of original videos on my YouTube channel. Feel free to subscribe. It's youtube.com/onthemoveshow.
All right, we'll check those out. Mack, thanks again for coming on the show.
All right, thanks for having me.
Hey Preppers and Patriots, American Meltdown, the long-awaited sequel to American Exit Strategy, is now available in Kindle and paperback. In American Meltdown, Book 2 of the Economic Collapse Chronicles, the new president, Anthony Howe, signs an executive order banning all semi-automatic weapons. Matt, Adam, and Wesley Baer begin training with their local militia for the battle that is coming. Within weeks of the inauguration, the $700 trillion derivatives bubble pops when rates on U.S. debt skyrocket. The derivatives crisis is the final nail in the coffin of the banking system and the death of the fiat currency system in America. With the dollar gone, commerce comes to a screeching halt. While times prove to be tough for all, survival favors the prepared. Get your Kindle or paperback copy of American Meltdown, Book 2 of the Economic Collapse Chronicles on Amazon today.